I am Abhilash Pillai. I'm an assistant professor here in National School of Drama, and also I'm a freelance theatre director. Also, sometimes I design. Otherwise, basically, my subject of teaching in National School of Drama is about design and direction. My PhD topic was visual language in Indian theatre. So I had been, in a way, I was just going through the visual language of Alkazi and Karanji. So at that time, I had some kind of an observations on Mr. Karanth's work. It was quite interesting that while learning here and working under Karanji and all, there was always this understanding that he was deeply influenced by the folk theatre, but I would say that he was deeply influenced by the urban theatre. More and more, when I do try to learn the visual language of Karanji in his works, what I am getting is that he was more influenced by the kind of urban theatre, because this whole Gubbi Veeranna company and all this thing, they are essentially an urban theatre. They are not one of those very folk theatre. I mean, it's like he was influenced by Yakshagana for his Varnam, but then he didn't directly use any of the Yakshagan things into Varnam. So probably there will be influence of music, but then his music, his sound, and his way of explaining the oral quality is something which essentially starts from urban. I wouldn't say it starts from folk. Definitely he has the classical and folk connotation, or the grammar. He may get influenced for the music, the grammar of the folk and the classical, but his whole influence and his whole push for the whole thing was urban. I mean, his music can easily relate, because he would try to catch up with sounds, even though he talks a lot about rhythms, but he would use any kind of voice which is theatrical for him. He would always, Karanji would always say that it's a theatrical voice. Now, theatrical voice is something, if you'll see from the popular genre, it's not one of those nice, good sounds which you can hear, but it could be very theatrical. That means it could be something which engages your mind, which holds your senses, the hearing senses, and which will start making you to think something on the sound. And this was his very, very special kind of a quality. That's why I would say it is urban driven, because urbanization of India in a way is about different kinds of sounds. It was not only about chanda and mridang and tabla, but it's all about even whistles, even chai 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 in a railway station. All these are urban sounds, and that's where his whole push comes for the creativity. So putting the folk, the classical grammar with this urban soundscape makes it something quite unique and something very contemporary. And that's how even today Karanji remains to be contemporary for all of us who are his students. Other thing, he had this very strong understanding of oral aspect of theatre, and he would always in the classes would say that in India the visual is also through oral. It's like, do you think I should talk to you in Hindi or?
Whichever is comfortable.
Okay. I mean, sometimes you remember his voice inside. That's why he would say in Hindi that मतलब पूरा दृश्य बनाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, क्योंकि बहुत सारे कहानियाँ जो इंडिया में, भारत में हमको मिले हैं, वो हमको दादी माँ से मिले हुए हैं, तो उसमें और वो दृश्य हमारे अंदर बनती है, तो उसका मतलब एक ऑरल एस्पेक्ट है जो इंडिया में बहुत स्ट्रांगली आता है. तो हर चीज़ के लिए एक जो विजुअल बनाना, जो आज की दुनिया में सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट होके आ रहा है कि आपको वीडियो, आपका मोबाइल तक विजुअल से भरा हुआ है. एनीथिंग, कुछ भी आज ऑथेंटिक करना है तो उसको विजुअल देना पड़ेगा. इवन पुलिस केस भी विजुअल देख ले तो प्रूव हो जाता है, वीडियो में कैमरा में देख ले तो प्रूव हो जाए. मन के अंदर क्या चल रहा है, विच कितना भी बड़ा एक्सरे रख ले वो पकड़ नहीं सकते हैं, ठीक है. सो एंड दैट इज़ व्हाट हिज डिक्शनरी वाज. ही वुड से बहुत सारे चीज़ें जो एक आदमी दूसरे आदमी से बताता है ना, उसी में थिएटर होता है. सो दैट ऑरल एस्पेक्ट्स which he would say is what one has to start constructing. You don't have to search visual languages for it. और वो थिएटर में हम कैसे, थिएटर में था, थिएटर में कहानियाँ बहुत चलती थी, कहानियाँ गानों से चलती थी, इसलिए गाने इतने इम्पोर्टेंट हो जाते थे. और गाने तो इसलिए वो बोलते थे कि जब बोलते हैं तो गाना जैसे होना चाहिए और जब गाते हो तो बोलना जैसे होना चाहिए. दैट इज़ बिकॉज ऑफ द नरेटिव also which he was interested, and narrative need not be linear to him. It was all broken, stop, go, stop, back and forth. It keeps moving, all his narratives. So probably this is what he was trying to say, was that आपको एक visual language मतलब एक visually चाहिए, आप oral aspects में से भी theatre construct कर सकते हो, which was a big thing. I think it's one of the most challenging things even today, and I think today we can address that more, because when everything is moving to visuals, towards visual, and this whole senses of oral, visual becomes the most important sense, and this, so then we can bring back the oral. This was one of the basic things which I was keen with Karanji. While working with Karanji as a student, and also today when I think about Karanji, that this is something which even today we are not doing that much in theatre. We are all running behind creating visual language, the whole scenographical aspect of theatre which is coming into is something where I have a deep question towards it. Then what about the oral aspects is something which one has to really address. Alkazi had an essential way of looking theatre visually, even though his text and his rendering of the text, his vocal, the diction, the vocalization, everything was from his generation of students says that they were perfect. Always perfect had to be questioned. That's another thing. But at the same time, his whole vocabulary, what we see through the photographs, are visual. And in the visual, if you see Andhayug or what I have seen his production was the repertory production, and when we were studying in National School of Drama, that was Julius Caesar, and one could see very strong vertical lines, and the whole thing was vertical. I mean the verticals were always strong, even the Purana Kila and all those sets had strong verticality, and probably his way of looking at India and the way how he interprets India was also through an influence from Nehru to, it was a kind of a Nehruvian way of looking at India, but also with Alkazi's view on it. But as soon as, so there's a kind of a vertical aspects to the whole thing, how India shifts. But as soon as when you come into something like Karanji's way of looking at art form, this is my very much from the visual aspects I am saying, his designs were more done by, I mean like when we were studying, his designs were sometimes he does it, or sometimes a designer, a renowned designer like Mr. Robin Das or Mr. Bansi Kaul, they all come in and they execute Karanji's design, or they design and Karanji does productions into that design. And what one could see was a kind of an horizontal, and horizontal lines were much more stronger. And also I think his aspects of looking at space was also horizontal. At the same time, his way of functioning, everything was horizontal, I would say, because the way how he made he would say that in every state there should be a National School of Drama. He was the one who would voice that. That's an horizontal way of looking. The central, there's only one National School of Drama, which was Alkazi's time, and that is the ultimatum of the theatre teaching. And Karanji would more say that go. I mean, there could be one National School of Drama in Delhi, in center, but there could be many other National School of Dramas in different regions. So that's so this whole thing of central and having a pillar in the center, like you have many pillars in many places, and hence it becomes more horizontal. So his whole view, his ideological view was also to some extent horizontal, which I would compare from like something like Ramnagar of Ramlila. Again, it's folk, but that folk also has the kind of mixture of, I wouldn't say folk, I would say, I wouldn't say, because folk is not the right term to say, but uh, traditional, Ramnagar of Ramlila, and then you have something like urban theatre, which is also horizontal, because it doesn't limit you itself. It would give more and more ways to do function in your own ways of art, and that's what most of the Karanji students, like all of us, we are doing. We have mini freedom. We bring in recorded music to live sounds to all these different kinds of looking at theatre from all different lenses, looking at theatre from all different, looking at theatre even from looking at theatre from validating colonialism, looking at theatre from the neo-colonial point of view. All these things are something which can easily can, I mean, one can easily move along with Karanji's vocabulary, but and that's what is something which I was more interested into. So there's an horizontal aspect even in his ideological way of moving. That's my understanding, and also his way of looking at theatre in the whole country, and even in his designs. It was more horizontal because all the curtains they were holding, I mean the Tirashila or whatever, there are many names to this holding of the curtains in Yakshagan, in Kathakali. So these are all horizontal lines, and people come with that, and then how they introduce themselves. So there's a lot of horizontal aspect from visual to his ideological proposition. To be very frank, I also have this, Karanji preferred that an open theatre, more a more kind of, how would I would say, a kind of flowing theatre, where a theatre can happen, and theatre need not be that formal, theatre need not be that, it could be, as he would put it, कि एक मजाक में भी थिएटर होता है, थिएटर से एक मज़ा तो आना ही चाहिए. So but at the same time there was always this aspect of, there's always this aspect of the political which was there in Karanji's work. One can't override that, because he would, and it is not done consciously by him. This is something which, it's not that he would bring a kind of a political ideologue into his work, but his work simply shows that, and shows that means simply it comes out of it, probably because the way how he positions his work, of this mazak, the masti, the sounds, the kind of improvisations which he does for animal entrance and all those things. I mean, and he would, and his influences were, I mean, it was something, nothing stopped him. He would take something from tradition to classical to something which is very heavily very modern, contemporary, somebody who's crossing the road, zebra crossing, everything he brings into. But while coming on onto the stage, you won't see definitely a zebra crossing. But the actor who would be doing that must have gone through all this to have that onto the stage, to get prepared for it. And that's where I think it is interesting, Karanji, in a way.